I'd like to call the Wednesday, February 20th Planning Commission hearing to order. Heather, if you could call the roll, please.
Mr. Granger?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Klee?
Here.
Macbeth?
Here.
Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Mr. Schaller?
Here.
Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Okay, so we had a busy January and we had 3 meetings, our regular hearing and work session for the comp plan and a CIP work session. So there are 3 sets of minutes. Are there any changes or corrections? Or we can set them as a lot.
I move to accept the minutes of January 16, January 23rd, and January 30th, 2019.
Second that motion.
Mr. Granger?
I will say aye, although I was absent on the 30th, so I'll abstain from that one.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
So there are no consent agenda items, which moves us to public hearings. At our last hearing, we moved to defer any actions on the CIP until after we had our work session, which has now taken place. And so I reopened the public hearing with regard to the CIP. Carolyn, did you have anything else to add?
No, other than in your packet, staff did the draft memo to the city manager based on comments at the public hearing and at the work session, which was attached, and commission needs to make modifications if necessary or recommend approval of the memo to the city manager so he can include it in his budget.
So eventually we need to open this up to public hearing, but before we do that, is there any initial comments?
I have just a very minor editorial comment, which is that the 4th bullet point supports is redundant, so I'd just like to drop that. Sorry to introduce editorial stuff in this meeting.
Support the study.
Already says that.
Just delete supports the
Yes, study
point.
and future construction. Sorry. Okay, cool. Perfect. Okay, so let me open the public hearing and then we can come back for further discussion. So opening the public hearing, if anyone would like to come forward. Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. I just I wanted to make a couple of comments, I guess, like for the record, in case someone was actually very closely looking at the minutes of the CIP work session relative to this memo. From my perspective, both the minutes and the memo are, correct as they stand and made better by the edits that have been made before and today. But at the end of the CIP work session, we wind up with 7 bullet points that then are boiled down to 4 here, and I wanted to make sure that everyone saw that we weren't missing something or moving something away. The sidewalk issues are combined. A discussion that we had about Merrimack Trail, the road of Merrimack Trail was actually sent to Public Works for further review, and so it was moved off. The issue on workforce housing, that is something that is being discussed right now on the Neighborhood Balance subcommittee that Andrew is a member, is our constituent member there. And the final piece that was, so the 2 pieces that were skipped per se, workforce housing, which is covered by the Neighborhood Balance Committee, and also the comment that we had about not wanting to forget about future projects. One of the comments that we had was that we were used to seeing that 5-year plan actually filled out more in the 5 years, and it really was only filled out in year 1, 2, which for us, moving to, when we're thinking 3 to 5 years or 7 to 10 years, it's nice to have those. And I think that potentially that's not actually a reflection on the current capital improvement program, but I think maybe it's more of a sidebar that we need to send to Andrew, that for our purposes, maybe they can return in future years to have those sidebars filled out. But that's just making sure that we see the comparison of the work session minutes versus what's the memo. But I think the memo captures what is part of the capital improvement program for budgeting for fiscal 20. So are there other comments with regard to that?
I appreciated the editorial comments of Vice Chair Klee. That was all that I had.
Then would someone send this forward to city manager?
I move that we send the memo forward to Mr. Trevette.
Second?
Second the motion.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Mr. Rogers?
Aye.
That brings us to our open forum, and so I will open the floor to anyone who might wish to come forward. Seeing no one, we'll move forward. We have no other business before us today, unless there is any new business or other items that someone wants to bring up. Okay, seeing that, then we have our information items in the packet as usual, and next week we will gather again on Wednesday at 4 o'clock for what I assume will be a full meeting, as we will be working on our comp plan and seeing our large institutions between Colonial Williamsburg and William & Mary. Next month, there are no hearings already on our agenda, and I gather there's no current like site plans or anything in process, so we very likely may be given a day off, but don't give away your time yet. But the week after our regular hearing, March 27th, we once again will have our comp plan work session, and we'll see the other large institutions in town, the Williamsburg James City County Schools, as well as the library. Board, we're adjourned.